Hello, everyone. This is Francois. I think that everybody is already there, so we'll be starting the webinar right away. Um, so good evening for those in on the northern hemisphere, and good morning for the other one in Australia, New Zealand, and other places. Um, so thank you very much for taking the time for this presentation. Uh, so today, what I will do, I will present an overview of the latest load management and injury prevention research. I'll share some experience I accumulate over the years managing workload and working with athletes in monitoring programs, and also I'll explain how to implement a quality athlete monitoring program in a simple and practical way. I will focus on very simple things, the thing that works, that have been proven to work, and that have a robust scientific background. As a quick presentation of myself, I'll say that I worked as a full-time strength and conditioning coach for more than 15 years. I worked with all kinds of sports and athletes. I used a lot the session RPE method since it was presented by the Dr. Carl Foster back in the late 90s. In 2004, I created the first web-based monitoring system. The name was athletemonitoring.com at the time already. And at the time, I was probably one of the only one to use this kind of tools. A few others people were using monitoring devices, but at the moment, at the time, it was very, very embryonic. Right now, everybody is talking about load management and so on, but back then it was we were just a few handful of people. So here is how the webinar will unfold. First, we'll go over a few injury statistics, cause and risk factors. Then we'll go through a couple of important concepts and definitions. Then I'll present the monitoring tools. We'll put a big focus on the management of internal load. So we'll be talking about session RPE and about heart rate monitoring. And also we'll go over some the key evidence-based load management metrics, such as acute chronic workload ratio, weekly load increase, and monotony, and so on. Finally, we'll put everything to practice during a quick tour of athlete monitoring, where I'll show you basically how an athlete can report their wellness data, their training session, put their feedback, and then a coach can have alerts and optimize workload based on those alerts. Then we will conclude with a few recommendations and tips. After the presentation, we'll have about 10 minutes for a question period. So we'll start first with sports injuries. Sports injuries are a big problem. They are everywhere, as you know. I put some statistics there on the screen, but in the US, for example, high school and college athletes, so basically 14 to 19 years old, there are 1.5 million of those kids getting injured practicing during sports activities. In the UK, there are about 400,000 sports emergency per year. In professional sport, professional soccer, there is the World Player Union that published a study last year, 2 years ago, that shows that 38% of professional soccer players suffer mental health issues. The general population is about 13%. And there is a link, apparently, according to this study, with the number of injuries the players are sustaining. More than 60% of them have at least one severe joint or muscle injury. So, of course, those are those are very costly issues. They cost fortune to the health system. They cost fortune to clubs. And also, of course, they have a deep impact on the player's life. And also in terms of performance, that's conclusion for the FIFA that injuries or decreased match availability will negatively impact the team performance. Injuries are not bad luck. Well, a lot of time we hear, well, we weren't lucky. That's sad, but you know, injury are part of the game. Well, not all of them. Of course, there are some accidents that you cannot avoid, but many of injury can be avoided. There are a few studies here that are pointing out towards fatigue as a key element in the apparition of injury. The reason why is that decision fatigue decrease the decision-making ability, decrease coordination, decrease neuromuscular control, and of course increase the risk. To illustrate that, there is this study from 2015 that players' fatigue, rating of fatigue and sleep quality are significant predictor of injuries. Fatigue and ACL. Fatigue contribute directly to ACL injuries. This is high academic stress. So when you are working with young athletes, student athletes, university or college or school age athletes, well, they have academic stress. They have exams. Well, they are likely to get injured much sooner than usual. In professional hockey, ice hockey here, a study for almost 10 years ago now, they show that player average playing time per game is a significant predictor of concussions. And of course, the usual increase in training load, which is, we talked a lot of that at the moment during the week prior to the injury. So the current training load within this week versus the last 4 weeks, that's a big risk as well. So the problem is fairly simple. When load exceeds the capacity of the athlete, well, the athlete will likely to be injured or likely to be at very high risk of getting injured. There are two main situations. Either the athletes are psychologically or physically unfit to tolerate the training load. So basically, they are either undertrained or they are stressed. They are concentrated on other things and they are not ready. They are not fully there when the hard task has to be done. So psychologically, they are not ready to do it. Or physically, because they are not trained properly, or they didn't train enough during the summer. They come into the training camp and they are not fit, and they are doing the training session and they get injured. So that's the first situation here. Second situation, this is fairly common when you have athletes who are very dedicated professional athletes, very serious athletes. They are super fit, they are very well trained, but they need a break. They need a rest, and they don't have the time to do to rest or to have a break. So this is a very common situation, and unfortunately, it's happening very, very often. An example here is this young girl here. She's 22 years old. She is the defending World Cup ski champion, Swissess. And last February, she teared an ACL joint and a ligament, sorry. And what during her interview, she said, "Well, there is no bad luck in an injury." This is in French, I translated. So she said that she didn't got injured by chance. And further down in the interview, she was saying that the rhythm was frenetic, time was flying too fast. I never had a minute to relax. I asked for a break for months and didn't get it. So she was in this particular situation here, and then unfortunately she was going a downhill race, and then she tears an ACL, so she's off for the entire season. The risk comes from many sources and fatigue as well. You have different components here, things you can control and things you cannot control. Training competition load, so you have cumulative load, the load increase, and so on. The competition schedule, the game to training ratio, the lot of playing time, the fixed slot congestion, so that's a calendar of competition, lots of travel. The training schedule, number of hard day per week, the monotony, those are factors that you can control at some point. Other factors, inadequate warm-up, when poor fitness, those are things that you can work on. For soccer, for example, you have the FIFA 11 program warm-up that is incredibly effective. They can reduce ACL injuries by roughly 50%. So this is an example of fixing this kind of issue. So you can have an impact on that. And after that, for type of sport, early sports specialization, age, those are things that it's very difficult to act upon. The age, unfortunately, is going inexorably, there is nothing we can do about. But older athletes have a less tolerance to load than younger athletes, even if they are playing at the same level of performance. And then, of course, you have lifestyle and well-being issues, pre-game fatigue, poor sleep quality, and so on. So those are things that you can easily, or you can focus on education, or can be addressed via education. How load management works? Well, it's pretty straightforward. The goal is to reduce the risk and improve the performance. You monitor the fatigue, load, and non-sport stressors, both physiological and psychological. Then you detect inadequate workload when decide if workload is too high or too low or too high for the current state of the athlete. And then you adapt the training program, recovery and rest based on those elements. So this is just a graph on the right side that explains or that illustrates the relationship between the performance level. The performance, that's the document for Carl Foster back in a long time ago now. But basically what he did, he plot the performance in personal best for speed skaters. And then he compared that with the weekly load. So we were ranging, I think the maximum here was about 5,000 units per week. In team sport, it's much less, but those are Olympic, those were the load for Olympic speed skaters. So what you find is that performance increases until a certain point. That's a 100% best performance. And then when load continue to increase, then load is going this way. And when load increase, then performance is going down, and then you start in overreaching and you drop in overtraining. The performance decrement are getting way faster. And of course, this is the kind of area when you start seeing athlete being sick, getting injured, and so on. What is load? Now we'll be addressing a couple of definitions. Everybody is talking about load. Knows that at the moment, companies are developing their own load metrics, and all of this creates a lot of confusion. So we'll be just doing over a couple of definitions to clarify the things. So the definition here, load or workload, those are fairly synonymous. Workload is the work, is the preferred work of Tim Gabbett, and load is the preferred word of other people. But those things are basically the two words that we can use. That's a combination of sports and non-sports stressors. So this is not, workload is not just the training load or the running load. It's combination of everything. And to monitor that, you need questionnaire, you need some subjective measure, you need some objective measure as well. That's a global load unit. Here you have the external load. So external load is the external stimulus applied to the athlete. So that's basically the work the athlete is asked to do. When he's playing a game of soccer, or a match of soccer, well, that's going to be the total distance, the number of sprint, the number of high-speed running. If it's a boxer, well, it's going to be the number of bouts and the number of attack and defense. And if it's, so it's basically the stimulus. And this is measured using devices, accelerometers, GPS devices, dynamometers, and so on. If it's weight training, it's the weight you lift, basically, and the total tonnage at the end of the workout. So that's the external load. And then you have the internal load. That's a physiological and psychological response to the external load, combined with non-sport stressors. So that, again, this is a kind of combined metric measurement, but it's the trigger of training-induced adaptation. So internal load is extremely important because the external load is something you have to do. And then the internal load is the response, the body response and the mental response to this work. And then if you don't respond well, you need to modify the external load to adapt to that. So it's kind of a loop here. You monitor internal load, then you adjust the external load. You monitor, you adjust. To monitor internal load, there are two basically type of tools. If you want to monitor the physiological load, so you can use heart rate monitors, for example, or lactate concentration, for example. If you want to monitor something more combined, more holistic. You can use psychological and physiological all together. You use tools such as a session RPE. Now we'll be focusing or presenting the two main tools used to monitor internal load. The first one is heart rate. So the rationale is that it uses the linear relationship between heart rate, that's the blue line here in this graph, and then the rate of oxygen consumption. That's the green line here. So you can see this is the duration of effort, and that's the VO2, so the oxygen uptake, and the heart rate. So there is a linear relationship between those two, but for a specific zone. After VO2 max, when you have maximum effort, well, VO2 max is going down and heart rate is still coming up. And before that, when you have very short, very intense effort, then the heart rate is not going fast enough, and there is no relationship basically between the level of effort and the VO2. That's the reason is in this graph at the bottom here, when you see the contribution of energy system, that's the aerobic contribution, so the aerobic system here, and that's the anaerobic system, and that's the duration. So you see a 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. So for 1 minute, you have about 30% of the effort is coming from the aerobic contribution. And even if you are going to 3 minutes, it's half and half. So if you are using a tool that is based on the relationship between heart rate and oxygen uptake, well, you cannot measure effectively kind of effort that or type of efforts that are in this kind of zone, because the aerobic system is not solicited at the maximum level. So that's that's one of the issue with the heart rate monitoring. The calculation of load, is made using the sum of score for each individual training zone. So when you have different zone in heart rate, with heart rate monitoring, you divide the intensity in different zone between 50-60% of maximum heart rate, 60-70, and so on and so on. And then you sum the time spent in each zone, and then you calculate that, and that's create a load. So that's the rationale or the way to calculate load with heart rate. Problems: it doesn't measure the psychological components. Of course, you just measure the heart rate. Then heart rate fluctuates daily. So you need to have a regular calibration of those zones, because maximum heart rate is fluctuating, resting heart rate is fluctuating, and exercise heart rate, submaximal heart rate, also fluctuating regularly. So you need to calibrate your heart rate monitor very regularly to have accurate zone. If you use formula to predict the maximum heart rate, well, it doesn't work well. That's the 220 minus the age. That's the formula, and that's the data point here. So you can see there is a big discrepancy between the prediction and the actual measurement. And finally, the most important thing, if you work with sport that are relying on short duration, high intensity, repetitive sprint type of activities, well, the heart rate monitoring underestimate load for those type of activities. Now we do have the session RPE. Session RPE, the load is calculated using the difficulty of the session, the global difficulty of the session, rate by the athlete on a scale of 10. You have the scale right there from rest to maximal, and then and multiply this by the duration of the session by minute. So the advantage is it combines both subjective and objective measure, psychological and physiological measure. It has been validated for most sport activity, anaerobic activity, aerobic strength training. You can also use the session RPE to monitor strength training session and age group. There are studies made with young kids that shows that they are able to self-rate their level of intensity or the level of difficulty of the session fairly well after they hit the age of 8. So after 8, you can use that. It's simple. It doesn't require any equipment. One of the main problem is that it requires the athlete to enter the data. So at the end of the session, the athlete will have to rate, well, how was your session? It was a 5, it was a 10, it was a 6. The athlete will have to answer this kind of question. So sometimes with professional athletes can be a little bit difficult to get them to do that. So in this case, you can have an assistant asking the question and then reporting that on the tablet. On the graph here, you can see the relationship between the session RPE load, the line here, and the heart rate calculated load. That's an important study from Impellizzeri, an Italian, that published it in 2004. He compares he actually validated the use of session RPE for professional soccer. So he compared the heart rate calculated load here, the black zone, using the zone I showed you earlier, and then the session RPE. And as you can see, both curves are almost identical. So I spare you the details, but he concludes that the session RPE can be very effectively used to monitor training load in soccer. Now, some important metrics. The key metric number 1, the goal is to anticipate fatigue, freshness, and fitness. So here we do have the chronic load. Chronic load is, in this graph, is represented by the blue zone in the background here. So the chronic load is the 4 to 6 weekly load average. That's linked to fitness. That's basically what the athlete, how the athlete is trained, what he's training for. Then you have the acute load. Acute load is typically 3 to 7 days. To simplify, it's 4 weeks for the chronic load and 7 days or 1 week for the daily load. But this can change a little, depending on the sport and the situation. Can change a little bit. But acute load is linked to fatigue. So acute load is the pink zone here. And then when you see when acute load is growing way over the chronic load, this means that the athlete is doing way more than he's used to do. So if you make the differential between the two, you get a freshness index. And that's the yellow zone at the bottom here. So when you have a big difference between acute and chronic load, when acute is going way over the chronic load, athlete freshness index going down, and athlete will be likely to be tired and not ready to perform well. However, when they are, for example, here, they are bouncing back, then you have a high chronic load, and then you decrease the acute load, then the athlete will be likely to be fit and ready to perform well. So that's the freshness index is basically a visualization of when athlete will be ready to perform and when they will be likely to be tired. Then there are the key metrics number 2. Here we are looking to increase the load safely and avoiding the spike in load. Those are 2 big risk factors. High performance athletes need to train at a very high load, but they need to get there safely. If you increase the load too fast, you're gonna get a problem. You're gonna have injuries. We have this example here that's from the Tim Gabbett paper from last year, where you can see that when you increase, that's a training load here, changing load per week, and that's a likelihood of injury. When you increase the load by 15% per week, so you take last week, you increase your training load by 15%, and then the risk will increase by 50%. So that's a curve. That's a differential here. So that's a very important concept. That's traditionally, I remember when I was working with track and field coach, they say, well, you shouldn't increase training load by more than 10% a week. But now we have the numbers to show that, that's kind of traditional thinking. Well, it's true, it's there, and then you get the data to prove it. So the week-to-week load increase need to be kept in check. Now you have the acute chronic workload ratio. I'm pretty sure you've heard a lot of that and read probably tons of paper on it. But that's basically that's an incredibly useful metric. This metric helps you to keep your athlete in a high load, low risk zone, which is great because they can train a very high load and still being protected from injury. When the acute load is low, the acute chronic load is low, then you have a lot of injury. That's the injury curve here. And when the chronic is too high, when you get into the danger zone and you increase the risk. And the risk of injury is not just instantaneous. There is typically a latency of 7 to 10 days. So you need to be, if you see a peak in acute chronic workload ratio, or even in week-to-week load increase, you need to be careful for the day after that. So keeping the acute chronic workload ratio within this zone, 0.8, 1.3 numbers here or units, helps you to keep your athlete in the right zone. Then you have monotony. Monotony, it's measuring the fluctuation of daily load within the week. Strain, that's the negative effect of heavy load combined with poor load distribution. So it's a combination of load multiplied by monotony. Foster in 1998 validate this method and find that 90% or close to 90% of the illnesses have been explained by heavy load, by peak in monotony and peak in strain. So peak in strain here, a little bit less for monotony. It's about 75% of illnesses explained by peak in strain in monotony, the bar in the middle, and training load here. Especially if you work with young athletes, there are studies now by Jayanti, US scientist, that shows that when athletes are training more, high school athletes are training more than 15 hours a week, the risk increased by up to 70%, risk of injury. And as well, when athletes are training more hours per week than their age. So, for example, if you have a 10 years old athlete who is training all sport combined more than 10 hours a week, well, the risk increases a lot. Finally, we are measuring the invisible. That's very, very important. Those are psychological elements that are often overlooked, but are extremely important. Athletes are not robots. You cannot just plug them a GPS or heart rate monitor or give them programs and they will do it and everything will be fine. Everyone who is working with athletes will understand that it's not the case. Oh, just one sec, please. So the first one, I know I'm a little bit longer than expected. Sorry, I apologize about that. Measuring the invisible. So you have the self-reported wellness, question about fatigue, question about perceived quality of sleep, level of stress. Those elements, those can be captured via a wellness questionnaire like the one I'm showing you here. Personal feedback, when you have athletes reporting feedback, I don't feel well, I don't like that, so this and that, then that's going to be very useful to identify motivation issues, stress, fatigue, and so on. So when athletes are sharing feedback, it's very important to act upon it. And then enjoyment with training. That's very, very important to measure that because it determines the motivation and persistence. And persistence and motivation, of course, they are needed for success. Also, lack of enjoyment is associated with a sport dropout, stillness, and burnout. That's a study here that was done in 2013. It was like a poll that was done in the US with boys and girls who were involved in high school sports. And the main reason why the student quit a team sport, well, I wasn't having fun. And then second was I had an injury. So if you take this for boys, almost 70% of them quit sport because it wasn't fun and they got injured. So that's a lot. And finally, wellness score, that's the IOC consensus statement from this year. The wellness score should be used to guide the adaptation of workload for each individual athlete. Additional metrics, you can also use vertical jumps. Those are effective way of measuring neuromuscular recovery if you have the equipment. And also heart rate variability is very widely used, but is very tricky to interpret. So You can use them, but they are not bulletproof tools. You need to use other tools like wellness questionnaire, for example, to analyze the level of recovery. In practice, so this is going to be a very quick express tour of the athlete monitoring, just to explain a little bit how it works on the workload management side. Athlete monitoring can do much more than that. You can do fitness testing, you can administer survey, you can track injuries and so on. But it's the core of the system is workload management. So the way it works is very simple. Athletes can enter will be reporting their wellness questionnaire. They will be completing wellness data on a daily basis. They can use this on tablet or on smartphone. And then once they do so, then coaches can they can also, I'm just switching here between screen. This one here, I'm logged in as an athlete. So I see my wellness questionnaire, so I can complete it. Do you feel sore today? How is your health? Quality of sleep? How was your sleep? How is your mood? So I can grab all those psychological elements, subjective elements that are so important. And also, if I want to use HRV, then I can just enter the HRV. That's not a problem. And then also, athletes can also put their own comments and submit the form. Then they can complete their training data. So after the end of the session, they will see a yellow button if you plan the session, because the system allows you to create programs and plan training sessions. They click on the yellow button. They select the difficulty, the RPE, and the enjoyment. They can also put some comment if needed, or not touch file, pictures, video, and then save the form. It's very simple. If you don't plan anything, and you can also just ask them to record data, they click on the little plus, and they select the activity they have been doing, the duration, the RPE, the enjoyment, and submit the form. Simple as that. Now, as a coach, I'm logged in as a coach here on my different browser. Then I can click on my team name, and I have my dashboard is popping up with acute chronic workload ratio, week to week increase, monotony. So I have all the risk factors here, all the metrics, the enjoyment, the wellness scores, the HRV. So everything is analyzed automatically. I can see the wellness score here. I click on it, and then I get the score for today, yesterday, and the average for the month. And also I can see the individual scores. If I want to see trends over time, I can also do it. And of course, I can modify the information. And if I want to see what the athlete actually selected or entered, then I can also see the log. If I want to see I see my week to week load increase is in the red here. Okay, well, I can click on it. The system will suggest some changes. So what I should do is, well, I need to decrease that for next week. So I can click on the calendar, and then I can see what's planned for next week. And next week, it's going to be, those sessions are planned. So because I need to reduce them, I can click on them, modify instead of doing this, because I need to reduce the load. I'll be changing this session to something much easier. Save changes, and I close the form. And automatically, my ratio, my acute chronic workload ratio for next week has been decreased. Now is getting close to the optimum zone, and the week to week increase has decreased as well. So I've reduced the risk. If I want to have an overview of all my athletes, I can click on the graphs. I can compare what I did plan, what the athlete did report. For all the metric I want, I can see all my wellness score, see everyone on the same graph. If I want to compare, for example, level of fatigue for my group for today, well, this guy is in particularly tired. Those are kind of okay. And then I can also have an overview of the entire training response for individual athlete or entire team or subgroups, where you have for each day, you have the daily load, the session load here, when you have different colors in the bar, so you can have the different, so that's the load, the soccer load, the conditioning load, and that's the total load for the day, the 702. You can have injuries in red, and then you have the planned load. So even if you have planned load in advance, planned session in advance, the system will show you the load that you've planned, and actually, and also the response, chronic and acute and freshness that you are likely to be expected. You can also view the acute chronic workload ratio, the black line, and identify when it's too high, when it's too low, so you can identify peaks. You can also identify monotony. So it needs, here it needs improvements here. It's when it becomes, when it's above 2, well, it's pretty risky. So you need to increase the contrast between hard and easy session within this way. And then, of course, you can see the chronic load, the blue line, the acute load, and the freshness index. So this is a very quick, super quick overview of athlete monitoring. Now I'll be coming back to the conclusion. So in short, load management is fairly simple. It's not that complicated. The first step, you need to plan workload carefully. You need to increase weekly load very progressively. You try to avoid spiking weekly load. You alternate hard, easy day, moderate day, rest day. You make sure that all your athletes do have at least one rest day per week. Then when workload is planned, then you monitor it. You adjust daily load based on the athlete wellness and training response. So proactively, you reduce external load during stressful periods. You monitor and also you reduce external load when you have life events and sports-related stress. Because fatigue, quality of sleep, you need to reduce external load when you have those elements here. And then you make sure that fun and enjoyment are monitored and that athletes are really liking what they're doing. Because if they don't, well, they will quit. Make it happen. Those are finally 3 different recommendations that are based on experience. So to make it happen, it's not that complicated, but there are a couple of prerequisites, and those are the 3 ones. First one, you need to ensure buy-in from coaches and athletes. This is essential. If you don't do that, then, well, it doesn't work. If the head coach is not behind the project, it doesn't work. So make sure that you discuss with coaches and coaches are pushing the monitoring process and telling athletes, asking athletes to record the data. Then you have to trust athletes. When athletes are self-reporting their wellness and their load and their difficulty and enjoyment, of course, some will cheat. But at some point, because you monitor data on a very regular basis, you'll be able to spot trends and you'll be able to spot those who cheat. And when you trust athletes, then they will trust you back, and then they will be entering data and providing feedback more easily. The second point is monitor only the key metric. There is no point of now with technology and all the tools, you can monitor tons of things, but not everything is useful. So just make sure you monitor the key metric and use them to adapt the program. So you monitor wellness measure, session RPE, and then the acute chronic workload ratio, weekly increase, and the element I just mentioned a few minutes ago. And finally, keep it simple. Only collect data that really matters, that is really useful. Use a specialized software. This is very important because you can spend a lot of time tracking all those information, collecting data from athletes, analyzing it, providing information to coaches or recommendations, and then getting back to the athlete, discussing with them some issues. So it's very important to have a software that is very practical, that is very hands-on, and that basically does all the calculation you want and you need to make it happen. There is no need to spend fortunes. There are a couple of software that are extremely costly, very sophisticated. Sometimes they do much more than you really need, and sometimes they do just what you need, but they are extremely expensive. Some others are very simplistic, and so you need to pick the right one. If you need some help, we can help for sure. And also GPS, finally GPS, power meters, heart rate monitors, HRV, and so on. Those are important. They are a plus. They can be useful, but they are not necessarily required to implement a performance and injury prevention program that works. Finally, last slide here, it works from youth to pro. Those are just a couple of our example of clients of ours that are using our system, and we won big competitions. So some are high schools here. This is a high school rugby team in the US, college team here, America Cup. Well, for those in Australia, you know them, Sydney FC. They won the A-League champion last week or 2 weeks ago. Hurricanes, that's Super Rugby champion last year. They use our system, so it can be. So that's just a quick overview, illustration of the kind of team that are using this approach. So finally, thank you very much for assisting to this presentation. I hope you liked it. I did my best. I'm not an expert in presenting things like that, but I'm getting better. So hopefully you liked it. If you want to contact me, feel free to do it anytime. I put my contact and my email address. Twitter, it's for athlete monitoring, but typically I'll be posting new research and new information there. And also feel free to contact me on LinkedIn as well. I'm there. So right now, if you want, we'll be doing a quick question and answers. So for the question and answer, we'll be using the chat box. So I'll stop the screen sharing, and then if you want to share, to send me your question via the chat box, I'll be answering them verbally. When you have when injury occurs, yes, the wellness questionnaire is very important. The acute chronic workload ratio and wellness questionnaire are two different things. The wellness questionnaire is very useful. It is useful in a way that it provides you with some feedback from athletes regarding how they feel, if they feel stressed, if they all kind of non-sports related metrics, if you like. And especially when you have an athlete who is injured, is important to monitor those kind of elements or sensations or feelings, because when they are injured, they typically are not feeling well, and this is a time that sometimes wellness questionnaire and answer on wellness questionnaire and comments can be particularly useful to help them. It will not interfere with acute chronic number. Acute chronic number will be impacted by their actual training, when they are reporting training sessions. So you can monitor both when athletes are injured. Yes, when you yes when an athlete is stopping training, of course the acute chronic and all weekly increase. When the athletes stop, everything will go down, but when and it will abruptly go up when the athletes start to train again. Definitely, you need to take note. You need to make sure that sometimes the metric will not make any sense. So you need to keep the context in perspective as well. But then once the athletes start to train after 1 week or two, so typically when he goes back from injury, you start very easy, and then after the second week you start to get data, and then you can the number will make sense again, and then you can track progression very accurately. You're welcome. Well, in a youth coach situation, when staff are in time are very limited, the first element I will do is it's focusing on the wellness. Typically, the wellness questionnaire is extremely simple to complete and administer. The kids can have the wellness questionnaire on their smartphone. They can download the app. They put this on their smartphone, so they can record it basically anywhere. Because it's very simple to complete and ask questions about fatigue, stress, feelings, and mood and quality of sleep. It forces them to reflect, to self-reflect about their lifestyle, and this is a very important element. It's part of the education for the young athletes. So the fact that the questionnaire is so simple and so quick to complete, and the fact that it's so effective in provoking a kind of self-reflection for the athlete, this is very important. This is the thing I will start with. Also, of course, the coach will know immediately when opening a dashboard that based on the wellness scores, who is ready to train hard today and who is not ready. And so very easily the coach can manage or adapt the program or split the group in different subgroups to accommodate those who are ready to train hard and those who are not. So wellness questionnaire will be the first thing to start with when you work with young athletes. You are welcome. Any other question? Well, you're very welcome. So, well, I guess we don't have any more questions. So we'll be finishing the discussion. So thank you very much, all of you, for having taken this time. I'm sorry it was a little bit longer than planned, but a few minutes. But it was very interesting to see your questions and having you there. So so I'll leave you there. I'll be sending a recording of the webinar within the next few days. I'll also send you the slideshow so you can have it if you want. And also, of course, don't forget to have a look at athletemonitoring.com if you need a system to help you implementing those important metric and load management. Thank you very much. Have a good day and a good evening for those in North America. Thank you.